Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Chennai International Center, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to our 212th edition. I am standing in for your host, Mr. Chandramouli, who is out of the country. Today, we are honored to collaborate with the Madras Book Club to bring this very special event. And I also thank Sanmar for co-sponsoring the event. We would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to Ms. Jayanti Ramesh and Mr. S.R. Madhu from the Madras Book Club for their strong support and collaboration in making this event possible. For those who may be unfamiliar with the Chennai International Center, and I hope that there are not many of you who are unfamiliar with this, we are an organization dedicated to creating a dynamic platform for thought leadership, dialogue, and cultural exchange. Our mission is to bring together leaders, innovators, and influencers across diverse fields, business, academia, public policy, and the arts, to engage in meaningful discussions that inspire learning and promote positive change. CIC continues to play an integral role in fostering intellectual growth and building a vibrant community here in Chennai. Coming soon after our 78th Independence Day, tonight we honor the memory of those who are victims of the horrendous Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, a pivotal moment in our history that reminds us of the enduring prize of independence. This evening's event will focus on this book, Khooni Vaisakhi, a book of poems written by the father of Punjabi literature, Nanak Singh, who was himself a survivor of the Jallianwala Bagh Massacre. He won the Sahitya Academy Award in 1962. Khooni Vaisakhi was written in 1920, more than 100 years earlier, and it remains as powerful a narrative today as it was then. It has been translated into English by Nanak Singh's grandson, Ambassador Navdeep Suri, who is here with us today. It is our pleasure to introduce our distinguished author and our distinguished musician for this evening. Ambassador Navdeep Suri is a very, very dear friend of mine, and we were also colleagues in the Indian Foreign Service. He is currently a distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. Navdeep Suri's distinguished career includes his stints as India's ambassador to Egypt, India's ambassador to the UAE, and High Commissioner to Australia. His English translations of his grandfather Nanak Singh's classic Punjabi novels have been published by Penguin as The Watchmaker, by HarperCollins as A Life Incomplete, and Khooni Vaisakhi. His translations of the two novels on the partition of 1947 have been recently published as Hymns in Blood and A Game of Fire. Harpreet, where is Harpreet ji? He is a versatile artist who sings original musical compositions in Hindi as well as in regional Indian languages and dialects such as Punjabi, Bengali, Assamese, Rajasthani, and Haryanvi. He is best known for creating musical scores to epic works of humanist poets like Kabir and Bulle Shah. Credited for taking celebrated poets to the masses, Harpreet has also composed popular hummable tunes to the words of poets such as Pash, Avtar Singh Sandhu, Faiz Ahmad Faiz, and Nirala Suryakant Tripathi. The rhythmic blend of soulful poetry to the pulsating sounds of guitar and percussion are at once unique and innovative, familiar and foreign. Harpreet has performed at the Rajasthan Kabir Yatra, Mahindra Kabira Festival, Jaipur Literary Festival, Sacred Pushkar, Sacred Amritsar Festival, and many more festivals across India and abroad. I now have the pleasure to invite Mr. S.R. Madhu of the Madras Book Club to kindly say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Tirumurti. Good evening. It's wonderful to be a part of this stupendous event, and Madras Book Club considers it a great privilege. Jallianwala Bagh is a metaphor for cruelty and inhumanity on an epic scale. Winston Churchill himself, a symbol of British imperialism, called the shooting of April 1919 monstrous. All of us know about Jallianwala Bagh through books and articles in the media. But today, Ambassador Navdeep Suri and singer, composer, and guitar player Harpreet Singh will take us back to 1919. Ambassador Suri's eloquence will be as enchanting as Harpreet Singh's music. Khooni Vaisakhi promises to be a powerful and evocative recall of one of the most horrific events of all time. We must thank Ambassador Suri and his team for mounting this artistic tour de force. It has already been conducted in a few cities in India and will travel to the United States and Canada as well. But I think their job will not be complete unless they stage Khooni Vaisakhi in England. Englishmen need to be educated about their nefarious colonial rule in India, particularly its explosions of genocide. English textbooks don't mention these at all. It is important that the present generation of Englishmen get to know genuine history rather than the fake history they've been exposed to so far. On behalf of the Madras Book Club, I thank the organizers for making us partners in this splendid initiative. We wish you all the best in your endeavor to take Khooni Vaisakhi round the world. It will ensure that such an event of medieval savagery will never occur anywhere else in future. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Madhu. I now have the pleasure of inviting Ambassador Navdeep Suri. I thought it's good to begin with a short interaction with Ambassador Suri because it will set the context for the music which will come later. Your grandfather, of course, Nanak Singh ji, wrote this in 1920, and he was just 22 years old. And he had very little formal education, and I read you a very interesting comment that he was not sure whether he was a 5th class fail or a 4th class pass. And he was author of 59 books, including novels, plays, poems, short stories, and even translations. And before I throw some questions at you, I just wanted to give a flavor to the audience of this book, because I think it's important for you to get the flavor of what he has written. And the poems here, it starts, in fact, right with the Rowlatt Act and how the Act acted as the catalyst for all the disturbances to come later, then the shootings and General Dyer coming in and the shooting taking place, the parents looking anxiously for their children who were shot dead, the wailing of wives, the wailing of sisters, all that is captured here. And I just want to read a short excerpt on the poet's thoughts. What can I say about the morrow? Don't whisper a word, my heart wants me. At every corner, bodies strewn in rows. In the bazaar of corpses, no vendor to see. Even death, it seems, has turned its face. Enough, it says, just let things be. White sheets cover thy slumber deep. None lifts his head, nor opens his eyes for me. Those handsome lads of indulgent mothers now lay in scorching heat without shade of a tree. Happily, They left homes the previous day, now gone, abandoned, their names unknown. Like hermits who leave their homes and kin, just gone away into some different zone. Says Nanak Singh, every one of them got a bullet that carried his name alone. This is a short excerpt from what he has written. And my first question is a very obvious one, that to translate this from Punjabi into English, how did you manage to capture the rhythm, the cadence and the rhyme? And it's really fascinating how you captured it. And even when we read it in English, it's really, it stirs our soul. So how did you manage to do that? That's my first question to you.
Thank you, Jaru, and let me again start by thanking the CIC and the Madras Book Club, my friends at Sanmar, and you for having taken this on yourself personally. I never had a penchant for poetry. That's my opening confession. And I thought I was doing a reasonable job at translating some of the novels that my grandfather had written. And yet, when I'd done the first two and we were looking at what next, we knew that the centenary of Jallianwala Bagh was looming. So my mother, she kind of suggested, why don't you try a hand at Khooni Vaisakhi? It's such a classical poem. And I said, all right. And I started looking for advice from friends and started reading translations of poetry to wrap my head around it. And my first reaction was, I can't do it. This is not my cup of tea. And then friends of mine who had done some translations started telling me, but the important thing is to capture the meaning of what the poet wants. Not the rhyme and not the rhythm. So why don't you do it in free verse? And around that time, I was at the Jaipur Literature Festival, and our colleague and senior Pavan Verma has done quite a job translating Gulzar Sahib's poetry from Hindi and Urdu into English. And so I looked at his books, but Gulzar Sahib himself writes in free verse, mostly. And so the reason I mention this is that when you're doing it in free verse, you have a lot of latitude in terms of the vocabulary that you can use. So I was kind of mulling over it. I did a couple of poems. It didn't make too much sense to me. And then a friend of mine who, curiously, is an American diplomat and quite a polyglot and a linguist himself, had given me this book by Douglas Hofstadter, which is for the love of music and in poetry. And in that, he has this really interesting section. So the book itself is about a 15th century French poet who has a small poem of 20 lines, which is given to 10 persons whose first language is English, and they are asked to translate into French. And 10 persons whose first language is French, and they're asked to translate it to English. And there's a chapter and a version. And you see how a translator's brain works in so many different ways. Somebody's looking at this as a contemporary of Shakespeare and using a very Shakespearean rhythm and cadence to translate, and somebody else is using American slang to express the same meaning. But there was one section in that book where he takes one of Pushkin's great works, and there's four quadrants on a page, and 4 accomplished translators have translated the same text into English from Russian. And you see the variations in translation, but each one of them stuck to the rhythm and the cadence of the poem. And that was kind of decisive for me, that no matter how long it takes, I'm not going to depart from the cadence, because poems are meant to be read aloud, and you don't want to lose that part. In fact, one famous poet said, translating a poem in 3 verses is like playing tennis without a net. So, you're making it easy for yourself. And so that then you are operating within those 2 constraints. One is fidelity to the original, but the second is the limitations imposed by the vocabulary available to you that also rhymes. And towards the fag end of the poem, there is a section which people are writing, and Harpreet will sing that. The people are writing letters of anguish to the British Raj, to the rulers, saying, "What have you done to us?" And I struggled. Letters of anguish, how? There aren't enough words to rhyme with anguish. So how will I try and convey the meaning? And somewhere on a happy Saturday morning, a penny dropped. Forget letters of anguish. How about postcards of pain? And suddenly you find that there's a lot more leeway that you have with pain, a lot more words that rhyme and enable you to convey the sense. So, that is my journey. As I said, I'm not a student of literature. I'm an amateur translator, and this has mostly been a passion project. But I guess it is satisfying that you could find ways around it. But even then, I would still be very hesitant to do poetry again. One of the greatest Punjabi poets is a guy called Shiv Kumar Batalvi. And he has written some beautiful, beautiful poetry. But I've been told, why don't you take a shot? And I say, impossible. You just can't do justice to it.
No, it has been a work of passion. That's something which we can clearly see. And also because he is your grandfather. So why don't you please tell us something about him? He seems to be a fascinating personality from whatever I could
I think, my grandfather truly was a very unusual man. He was born in a very small village in Jhelum district in what is now Pakistan, in a very poor family. His father had a small grocery shop in Peshawar, and when he was just 10, he was asked to come to Peshawar and help out his father in the grocery store. And so he leaves his school, goes to Peshawar, but in 6 months his father's dead, and he's orphaned. And so that's why he jokes that he never got to study beyond the 4th grade in school. But he had an early sort of knack for composing verse, and he became very popular with a group of friends. And then he writes in his autobiography, which was one of the first autobiographies in Punjabi literature actually, that he was a wayward teenager looking for a purpose in life, and he came under the influence of this very pious, very spiritual priest at the Gurdwara in Peshawar. And under his influence, the guy who was born as Hansraj in a Hindu family converted to Sikhism. And with the zeal of the new convert, Nanak Singh then started putting his musical and poetic talents to writing verses in praise of the Sikh gurus. And so the first book that he wrote, which was published in 1918, was called Sadgur Mehma, and it became a runaway bestseller in Punjab. It became the foundation for his economic stability, and it actually brought him from Peshawar to Amritsar, which was then of course, still is the seat of the Sikh faith. And so he was in Amritsar, fairly politically engaged, that on April 13, 1919, he went to Jallianwala Bagh with 2 of his friends to protest against the Rowlatt Act. Both were killed in the firing. He himself was knocked unconscious in the stampede, left for the dead, and walked away from there, and of course then wrote this searing ballad. But that wasn't the end of it. The Rowlatt Act was still in force, and to be writing these things at that time was a real act of courage and protest against the British rule, because you knew the consequences of getting caught. In 22, he went to jail, again as part of the freedom struggle. And while he was in jail, he came across a fairly influential Congress Party activist who had enough clout to be able to bring in a trunk load of books into the jail. And in jail, he, for the first time in his life, read Munshi Premchand's novels and decided, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to write books that will reform society. He came out of jail in 22, and in 23 he wrote his first novel. And then for the next 50 years, he pretty much wrote a book a year. And later on became known as the father of the Punjabi novel. But what's remarkable, I think, through his books, and particularly this one you will see, and the last two that I've translated on the partition, I think he was ahead of his times in some ways, that there's a very robust commitment to secularism. He is unafraid of taking on the Shaltans in temples and gurudwaras. In one of his most famous classics, Chitta Lahu, the bad guy, the villain of the book, is actually the head priest of a gurudwara. And I think it takes some guts to be able to say that in those times. In other books, he takes up social causes, the poor treatment of women in our society, the oppression of caste, but bigotry is particularly something that riles him, and it's a constant theme. And I think what's fascinating when I translate his books now and learn them as an adult is to see the way he identifies problems in society, but then gets his own characters to get you to connect with them and even come up with solutions. So in Punjabi, he has a stature that is kind of like Munshi Premchand in Hindi, like Hardy or Dickens in English. His books are still part of the curriculum. If you are studying Punjabi in 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, college, you can't escape him.
In fact, this book was actually banned by the British, and all the copies were confiscated and they were burned. And for a long time it was lost. And I think you were mentioning that even the family did not know, and they didn't have a copy of it. So when he discovered that he actually written a book like this, they didn't have a copy of the book for him to translate to begin with. I think that was really a fascinating story. I mean, how did you manage to find it?
Well, I didn't. My father, who was a publisher of Punjabi books himself, to him goes the credit. So in those days, I'm talking about the 70s and early 80s, there used to be a very popular Punjabi literary magazine called Jagriti, which my parents used to subscribe to. And in one of the issues in early 1980, my father picks it up and reads this article by a fairly unknown lecturer in Punjabi language called Dr. Gupta, who's writing about Nanak Singh the poet. And my father's surprised. He says, everybody calls Nanak Singh the novelist. What's this thing about Nanak Singh the poet? And to justify his essay, this man has given excerpts from Khooni Vaisakhi. And my father says he had goose flesh, that this is a publication that we've been looking for 60 years, and how does this man have it? So he calls up the editor of Jagriti magazine and says, hey, who's this Dr. Gupta, and can I reach out to him? So he gets hold of Dr. Gupta's address. So he and my dad and my mom get on our Bajaj Chetak scooter and go off deep into the old city of Amritsar looking for Dr. Gupta's house. And then Dr. Gupta has his own story of his father having been a great collector of all manner of literature that was published in the early part of the 20th century. And nobody else in the family was interested, and all this stuff was sitting in his old house in the village. And when they were selling this house, it was literally put into gunny bags and brought into the basement. And so our friend Dr. Gupta is going through his dad's possessions and comes across this pamphlet published in 1920. And being a lecturer of Punjabi language, he immediately sees its significance and proceeds to write this article. And then the rest, as they say, is history. But it has an interesting sort of sequel to it, which is, so my dad and Dr. Gupta then collaborated to republish Khooni Vaisakhi in 1980 after a gap of 60 years. But, you know, we still didn't have access to the original when I was translating this. Even what Dr. Gupta had were kind of pages, but the cover was missing and so on. So now you come to June of 2019, and we are at the British Library at the Jaipur Literature Festival. And I meet the director of the British Library, and I said, look, I have a request. This book was banned, but knowing you guys, I'm sure you would have kept a copy for the record. And he said, he smiled, he said, give me a few hours. And he came back the next morning and he said, you know, you are right. We do have a copy in our Yorkshire archives. It's very fragile, but give me a few days and we will restore it, and I promise to give you a copy. So I actually laid my hands on a facsimile of the original 100 years later.
Wow, that's a fantastic story. In fact, you know, Mr. Madhu was referring to taking Jallianwala Bagh to the British. And this is precisely what Ambassador Navdeep Suri did. You know, the famous Rowlatt Act and Sir
Sidney Rowlatt.
Sidney Rowlatt. And he just discovered that his great-grandson, Justin Rowlatt, was actually in India working for the BBC. So he traced him there and he asked him that, well, this is what I'm planning to do. Now, why don't you write something about it? And he was very, very surprised at how Justin Rowlatt reacted and the way he has, it's all in the book, how he reacted to not just the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, but also what he felt about it as a great-grandson of Sir Sidney Rowlatt. I think it will be nice if you can just give an insight into how it happened.
Yeah, so when I was, you know, when you translate, even though it's a translation, you end up doing a fair amount of research on that subject and on that period and on the characters, so that you get the nuance right. You know, you got to feel it in your bones before you can actually put pen to paper. And so I read a small piece on the BBC website when I was researching about Rowlatt and trying to understand who this character was. That there's a guy called Justin Rowlatt who had visited Jallianwala Bagh and had written a short piece. So through my friends in the Ministry of External Affairs, I got hold of Justin's number. He was by then back in Delhi, back in London as the chief environment correspondent of the BBC. And I reached out to him, explained to him who I was, what I was doing, and I said, you know, would you care to contribute a piece for the book? And he said, yeah, sure. I think I've been maybe waiting to tell the story. And he initially sent me a first draft and followed up by a phone call. And he said, you know, this has been a very weird experience for me, because when I was writing this, I have a great uncle in the family, Uncle Richard, and he's talking to me about this period. And he said, you're bringing disrepute to the family. Your great-grandfather was a noble and honorable man, and he was rightly knighted for having produced the Rowlatt Act. You know, you're a disgrace, basically. And he said, I tried to argue back with Uncle Richard, and I was basically shut up, saying, the guys who were in Jallianwala Bagh were no different from today's Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And he said, I was so stunned that I have this unreconstructed racist in my own family who is able to say something like this in 2019 to my face. But anyway, Justin wrote this lovely essay called For the Sins of My Great-Grandfather for this book, which I thought was very brave of him. And Justin and I were actually together on the stage at the British Library speaking about Khooni Vaisakhi, and the third panelist was Kim Wagner, who's done a really authoritative history of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. And on Mr. Madhu's point, so there were a lot of young second, third generation British Indians in the audience. And you could see tears down their eyes. And they said, we've never heard this story because it's nowhere in our textbooks. What we read literally is a whitewashed account of imperial history. And so the question, as usual, came up that what would it take for the Brits to actually do an apology? This was discussed during the Queen's visit, it was discussed during Prime Minister Cameron's visit to Amritsar, and it never quite happened. So my response was that, what's the point of an apology that has to be wrung out of you if it's not felt spontaneously? But a better way to apologize is, can you at least now fix your textbooks and start teaching history as it was?
No, absolutely. And in fact, Justin Rowlatt, when he went to the place, the Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, he actually cried. He broke down and cried. So anyway, this, I wish I could ask you a lot more questions on this, but we'll probably leave that to the question and answer, which will come after the music. So thank you once again. It's a rare opportunity for us to hear from you. Such a moving book. And when I first read it, I was in tears when I read this. Thank you.
Thank you. Harpreet?
Harpreet, now may I invite you to.
For a 22-year-old who was writing this poem in 1920, it's almost like my grandfather knew that he's writing for posterity, which is quite unusual for a 22-year-old to have this, that he's witnessed something truly seminal and he needs to record it so that future generations will know. And so the very first section of the poem is an invocation. It's a prayer to Guru Gobind Singh, the 10th Guru. And Guru Gobind Singh, if you see his photographs, it's always a turban with a little plume in it. And I'll read out a short English excerpt, and then Harpreet will sing this in Punjabi in the original. O Father mine, with the turban plumed, I bow at thy feet, my divine Guru. Messiah of the meek, Savior of the poor, my divine Guru. Burdened with sin, this boat of ours is listing midstream, my divine Guru. Save it from going down in waters rough, guide it ashore, my divine Guru. Grant me thy cup of love and blessings, uplift my spirits, my divine Guru. Let my pen fly across the pages to tell this tale, my divine Guru. To pen a portrait of those departed ones, grant me the strength, my divine Guru, to remind my people across India, lest we forget their sacrifice, my divine Guru. To write the saga of our heroes such, your disciple is ready, my divine Guru. Do help me complete this mission of mine. Nanak Singh beseeches, O my divine Guru.
कलगी वालड़े शहंशाह पिता मेरे चरणा तेरे आप नमस्कार बेड़ी पाप दे नाल भरपूर होके पई डोल दी है मजेदार सतगुर करके मेर इस डुबदी जांदी नू तका मार के लावना सतगुरु भर के प्रेम दा एक चांदे प्याला जिस दे पिंदियां ही चढ़े खुमार सतगुरु चले नाल सुरूर मसरूर होके कलम दास दी तेज रफ्तार सतगुरु ओ दसे हाल अज उन्हां बे दोसियां दा जेड़े देस पर होए निसार सतगुरु दास्तान शहीदां दी लिखणे नूं दास आप दा होया त्यार सतगुर तोड़ चाड़ना अपनी मेहर करके नानक सिंह करे पुकार सतगुर
Music obviously does what translation can't do. But you know, the first few sections of the ballad are almost a chronological account of events in Amritsar in the first fortnight of April 1919. So you start off with capturing the mood in Amritsar when Gandhiji gives the call for Satyagraha on the 30th of March, saying next Sunday, April 6th, there will be a Satyagraha throughout the country in protest against the Rowlatt Act. In fact, Gandhiji is on his way to Amritsar and he's arrested at Palwal station near Delhi so that he can't make it to Amritsar. But there is a hartal in Amritsar and a lot of arrests are made. Amritsar is in this unusual situation that its top two leaders are a Hindu and a Muslim from the Congress party. There's Dr. Saifuddin Kichlu, a retired barrister returned from England, and Dr. Satyapal, a medical doctor. And together on the 9th of April, they lead the celebrations of Ram Navami in Amritsar. And it's a remarkable show of unity of the Hindu and Muslim communities. So remarkable that later, when the Hunter Commission of Inquiry is held to probe into the Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, and the Deputy Commissioner of Amritsar, Miles Irving, is asked to testify why he thought it was important to bring the army in, he said, for me, the first sign of sedition was the show of unity on the 9th of April at Ram Navami. And he said, when he saw Hindus and Muslims drink water from the same glass, he thought it was a deeply sinister act. It's part of the Hunter Commission of Inquiry records. So the next poem that we are coming to is in a very different mood. It's about Ram Navami being celebrated in Amritsar. I'll just read out a short excerpt to give you a flavor. Hindus and Muslims, they gathered together to rejoice at a festival, O my friends. Brotherhood conveyed by Muslims that day, beyond incredible it was, my friends. A festival of Hindus, though it was, Muslims made it just their own, my friends. 'Tis hard to describe this feeling new. A miracle it truly seemed, my friends. Dr. Saifuddin, Satyapal together tread on a path united, my friends. Fated with garlands, our stalwart duo sent out a message clear, my friends. Hindu and Muslim were just the same, such harmony never seen before, since God made this word, my friends. The seed of friendship between these faiths descended from heavens itself, my friends. Discord and difference seemed to vanish. Each saw the other as brother, my friends. Shared the same glass to drink their water, sat down for meals together, my friends. And then it goes on to say, but fate, it had some different plans. Why open your shops today, my friends? The town will be on strike tomorrow. You'll catch a hail of bullets, my friends.
Hindu te Musalmana rali mein urb manaya Musalmana ne aaj ittifaq wala beduti sabut vikhaya ਭਾਵੇਂ ਪੁਰਬ ਸੀ ਅਸਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਿੰਦੂਆਂ ਦਾ ਪਰ ਮੋਮਨਾ ਖੂਬ ਸਜਾਇਆ ਸੀ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਨਵਾਂ ਹੀ ਪ੍ਰੇਮ ਦਾ ਬੀਜ ਇੱਥੇ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਨਵਾਂ ਹੀ ਪ੍ਰੇਮ ਦਾ ਬੀਜ ਇੱਥੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਅਰਸ਼ ਤੋਂ ਆਣ ਕੇ ਲਾਇਆ ਜੀ ਦੂਰੀ ਸਭ ਦੇ ਦਿਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਦੂਰ ਹੋਈ ਦੂਰੀ ਸਭ ਦੇ ਦਿਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਦੂਰ ਹੋਈ ਵੀਰ ਵੀਰ ਤਾਈ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਆਇਆ ਜੀ ਪਾਣੀ ਇੱਕ ਗਲਾਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੀਤਾ ਖਾਣਾ ਇੱਕ ਥਾਂ ਸਭ ਨੇ ਖਾਇਆ ਜੀ ਸਾਰੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਹਿੰਦੂ ਤੇ ਮੁਸਲਮਾਨਾਂ ਰਲ ਮਿਲ ਇਹ ਪੁਰਬ ਮਨਾਇਆ ਸੀ ਹੋਣੀ ਆਖਦੀ ਸੁਣੋ ਨਾਦਾਨ ਲੋਕੋ ਹੱਟਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਚਾ ਕਸ ਨੂੰ ਖੋਲਿਆ ਜੀ ਭਲਕੇ ਫਿਰ ਹੈ ਤੁਸਾਂ ਹੜਤਾਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਨਾਲੇ ਵਸਣ ਗਿਆ ਤੁਸਾਂ ਪਰ ਗੋਲੀਆਂ ਜੀ
So, you have these celebrations of Ram Navami ending with this sense of foreboding that something bad is around the corner. On the 10th of April, the British arrest both Dr. Saifuddin Kichlu and Dr. Satyapal, and they are whisked away to an unknown destination. As soon as this news spreads within the city, there's a real anger, and so a group of the leaders of the city and the elders, they start marching towards the deputy commissioner's residence in the civil lines to deliver a petition to release the leaders. But the British have decided that there used to be this railway bridge that connected sort of the old city with the civil lines area. And they decide that nobody is going to be allowed to cross that bridge. And so there's firing into the crowd, and a lot of people don't know this, on the 10th of April, 3 days before the massacre. And between 25 and 30 persons are killed. And there's real angers in the city now. And a mob gets together and it ransacks many of the British-owned establishments in the city. The town hall is burnt. A couple of British-owned banks are burned. Offices are burnt. And 5 Europeans are killed that morning. And that's the provocation for the Lieutenant Governor Michael O'Dwyer in Lahore to ask the army to come and take charge. So the civilians basically hand over charge. And Brigadier Reginald Dyer, so a lot of people confuse Michael O'Dwyer with Reginald O'Dwyer, the brigadier. So he comes, and on the 12th, he does a flag march through the city and imposes curfew. And yet, on the 13th, people have gathered in Jallianwala Bagh to protest. I'll read a short excerpt. This section, I think, is very graphic, very visual, and deeply moving. 5:30 sharp, the clock had struck. Thousands gathered in the Bagh, my friends. Leaders came to lament the nation's woes, taking turns to speak out loud, my friends. Voiced grievance, hardship, anger, sorrow, saying no one listens to us, my friends. What can we do? What options left? Can't see any ray of light, my friends. Those words forlorn, they barely voiced, came soldiers thundering down, my friends. At Dyer's command, those Gurkha troops gathered in a formation tight, my friends. Under tyrants' orders, they opened fire straight into innocent hearts, my friends. and fire and fire and fire they did. Some thousands of bullets were shot, my friends. Like searing hail, they felled our youth, a tempest not seen before, my friends. Riddled chests and bodies slid to the ground, each one a target large, my friends. Haunting cries for help did rend the sky. Smoke rose from smouldering guns, my friends. Just a sip of water was all they sought. Valiant youth lay dying in the dust, my friends. That narrow lane to enter the Bagh, sealed off on Dyer's command, my friends. No exit, no escape, no way out was left, making Bagh a deathly trap, my friends. A fortunate few somehow survived, while most died then and there, my friends. Some ran with bullets ripping their chest, stumbling to their painful end, my friends. Others caught the bullet while running away, dropping lifeless in awkward heaps, my friends. In minutes, the Bagh so strewn with corpses, none knew just who was who, my friends. Many of them did look like Sikhs, amid Hindus and Muslims plenty, my friends. In prime of their youth, our brave hearts lay, gasping for one last breath, my friends. Long hair lay matted in blood and grime. In slumber deep they sleep, my friends, says Nanak Singh, who knows their state. But God, the one and only, my friends. And he goes on to tell you about the next day. With faces drawn and muffled sobs, they sift through corpses in silent fear. Like moth on a flame, hearts burn to ashes on seeing the fate of sons so dear. Ah, the pain of losing a child so precious, like heart is pierced with dagger or spear. Grief inconsolable melts toughest of souls, even faces most stoic shed tear after tear. Clutching lifeless bodies of precious sons, parents moan abject horrors of the day. My child, oh wake up just once more. What makes you sleep in a place so grey? You left us alone for a voyage so long. No goodbye you bid, nor farewell did you say. Couldn't you wait for a little while longer to let us join you on your eternal way? If time indeed had come to part, your parents could join without delay. Says Nanak Singh, you can't fight fate. When the master orders, you just obey.
ਠੀਕ ਵਕਤ ਸਾਡੇ 5 ਵਜੇ ਦਾ ਸੀ ਲੋਕ ਜਮਾ ਹੋਏ ਕਈ ਹਜ਼ਾਰ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜੂਣਾ ਅਸਾਂ ਦਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਔਖਾ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਜਾਇ ਕੇ ਕਰੀਏ ਪੁਕਾਰ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਕੋਈ ਸੁਝਦੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਤਦਬੀਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਢਾਡੇ ਹੋਏ ਹਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਲਾਚਾਰ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਅਜੇ ਲਫ਼ਜ਼ ਤਦਬੀਰ ਮੂੰਹ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈ ਸੀ ਉਧਰ ਫੌਜ ਨੇ ਧੂੜ ਤੁਮਾ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਥੋੜੀ ਦੇਰ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਫੌਜ ਗੋਰਖੇ ਦੀ ਜਨਰਲ ਡਾਇਰ ਨੇ ਅਗਾਂਹ ਵਧਾ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਮਿੰਟਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਕਈ ਹਜ਼ਾਰ ਗੋਲੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਜ਼ਾਲਮਾਂ ਖਤਮ ਕਰਾ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਮਿੰਟਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਕਈ ਹਜ਼ਾਰ ਗੋਲੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਜ਼ਾਲਮਾਂ ਖਤਮ ਕਰਾ ਦਿੱਤੀ। ਪਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਲੋਥਾਂ ਦੇ ਢੇਰ ਲੱਗ ਗਏ, ਕੋਈ ਸਕੇ ਨਾ ਮੂਲ ਪਛਾਣ ਉਥੇ। ਗਿਣਤੀ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਆਵੇ, ਗਿਣਤੀ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਆਵੇ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਹਿੰਦੂ ਮੁਸਲਮਾਨ ਉਥੇ। ਸੋਹਣੇ ਸੁਰ ਮੈਂ छैल ਛਬਿਲੜੇ ਜੀ ਹੈ, ਤੜਪਦੇ ਸ਼ੇਰ ਜਵਾਨ ਉਥੇ। ਨਾਨਕ ਸਿੰਘ ਨਾ ਪੁੱਛਦਾ ਬਾਤ ਕੋਈ, ਨਾਨਕ ਸਿੰਘ ਨਾ ਪੁੱਛਦਾ ਬਾਤ ਕੋਈ, ਰਾਖਾ ਉਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਭਗਵਾਨ ਉਥੇ। ਰੋਂਦੇ ਪਿੱਟਦੇ ਲੋਕ ਸੰਬੰਧੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ, ਢੂੰਡਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਮੁਰਦਿਆਂ ਵੱਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ। ਮਾਪੇ ਵੇਖ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਏ, ਵਾਂਗ ਪਤੰਗੇ ਦੇ ਜਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ। ਮਾਪੇ ਵੇਖ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਏ, ਵਾਂਗ ਪਤੰਗੇ ਦੇ ਜਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ। ਮੋਏ ਲਾਡਲੇ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਪੁੱਤ ਯਾਰੋ, ਸੀਨੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਟਾਰੀਆਂ ਸਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ। ਪੱਥਰ ਵਾਂਗ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੜੇ ਦਿਲ ਪੱਥਰ, ਉਹ ਪੱਥਰ ਵਾਂਗ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੜੇ ਦਿਲ ਪੱਥਰ। ਨੀਰ ਉਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਅੱਖੀਓਂ ਚੱਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ। ਮੇਰੇ ਲਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਵਾਰੀਆਂ ਜਾਗ ਛੇਤੀ, ਮੇਰੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਲਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਵਾਰੀਆਂ ਜਾਗ ਛੇਤੀ। ਜੰਗਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਆ ਕੇ ਕਾਨੂੰ ਸੋਵਣਾ ਸੀ, ਬਿਨਾ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਲੰਮੜੇ ਰਾਹ ਪਿਓ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸ ਕੇ ਵਿਦਾ ਹੋਵਣਾ ਸੀ। ਉਹ ਰੱਤਾ ਅਸਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਾਥ ਉਡੀਕ ਲੈਂਦੋ ਹੋ ਰੱਤਾ ਅਸਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਾਥ ਉਡੀਕ ਲੈਂਦੋ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਘੜੀ ਦੋ ਘੜੀ ਖਲੋਵਣਾ ਸੀ। जेकर आ गया सी तेरा काल बच्चा जेकर आ गया सी तेरा काल बच्चा माई बाप नू अगे चा ढोबना सी नानक सिंह पर लिखे नू कौन मिटे नानक सिंह पर लिखे नू कौन मिटे ए हुक्म करतार दा हो सी
So that's the power of Harpreet's music, making those words really not just come alive but go inside us. The next one is a poem titled The Voices of Martyrs, and this is after the event, and my grandfather is really, it's a semi-sarcastic tone, saying, we did this for you, my countrymen, and you haven't even remembered our sacrifice. And this is only a year later that he's writing. And he's saying there's no plaque, no monument, no nothing to mark the place of this sacrifice. It's kind of an invocation to people's sense of responsibility. I'll just read out a short excerpt. Make time to visit this Bagh of ours, echoing tales of our gallant souls of friends. With a heavy heart, they mock our nation. Thanks so much for your love, O friends. For this land of ours, we gave our lives, left family, home, and hearth, O friends. Ordinary folk we were, so much like you, loved life and partied too, O friends. Without a thought, we left it all to serve you till we die, O friends. Look closely at our bodies sieved, 1,000 wounds you'll see, O friends. You stayed at home, reveling in your life, exiled us from your hearts, O friends. How could you promise and forget? What a way to honor your word, O friends. And he goes on to say, no plaque, no bust, no monument built to mark the place where we died, O friends. Be ready now to take this mantle heavy. 'Tis time to discard your follies, O friends. Be a man, be prepared to serve the nation. Dare not forget this promise, O friends. Says Nanak Singh, one day you'll die for sure. Why not die for nation's sake, my friends?
जाके देख लो जलियां दे बाग अंदर की कुछ रहे शहीद पुकार लोको मेने मार के आख रहे हिंद ताई तुसां दा ਵੇਖਿਆ ਪਿਆਰ ਲੋਕੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਸਾਂ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਸ਼ਹੀਦ ਹੋਏ ਸਾਰੇ ਛੱਡ ਕੇ ਬਾਗ ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਲੋਕੋ ਛਾਤੀ ਢਾਕੇ ਵਾਂਗਰਾ ਚਾਂਦ ਮਾਰੀ ਲਈਆਂ ਗੋਲੀਆਂ ਅਸਾਂ ਸਹਾਰ ਲੋਕੋ ਸਾਡੇ ਸੀਨਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਰਾ ਆਣ ਵੇਖੋ ਛੇਕ ਪਏ ਨੇ ਕਈ ਹਜ਼ਾਰ ਲੋਕੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਘਰੀ ਬੈਠੇ ਮੌਜਾਂ ਮਾਣਦੇ ਹੋ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਅਸਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦਿਲੋਂ ਵਿਸਾਰ ਲੋਕੋ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਾਂਗ ਹੀ ਤੁਸਾਂ ਵੀ ਤਿਆਰ ਰਹਿਣਾ ਸਭੇ ਗਫਲਤਾਂ ਦਿਓ ਵਿਸਾਰ ਲੋਕੋ ਬਣੋ ਮਰਦ ਤੇ ਮੁਲਕ ਦੀ ਕਰੋ ਸੇਵਾ ਮਤਾਂ ਭੁੱਲ ਜਾਵੇ ਇਕਰਾਰ ਲੋਕੋ ਨਾਨਕ ਸਿੰਘ ਹੈ ਮੌਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਆਉਣੀ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਾ ਦੇਸ ਪਰ ਹੋਵੇ ਨਿਸਾਰ ਲੋਕੋ
So the last segment that we'll do this evening is what I alluded to in my earlier comments, the postcards of pain. It's a fairly long segment, but he's only going to sing a short part of it. But I'll just read out a little excerpt because it will also tell you the challenges of translation. Please heed our humble pleas, O our Lord. Your hapless folks seek help, our Lord, and so we plead in vain our postcards of pain. Your people face these times so grim, our cup of sorrow fills to the brim, while the Raj rejoices in its reign, our postcards of pain. Sir Rowlett came out of the blue, his bill got passed, none had a clue, and troubles came like a flood of rain, our postcards of pain. O'Dwyer signed that terrible law, a heap of misery is all we saw, only those butchers stood to gain, our postcards of pain. And then it was that Dyer's turn to light a match and let it burn, fired bullets at us with such disdain, our postcards of pain. Our brothers killed without a thought, our leaders arrested and left to rot, fake charges and a smear campaign, our postcards of pain. And it ends, O Lord, to listen to our prayer, your gentle flocks in utter despair, their tears flow without restraint, are postcards of pain.
ਸ਼ਹਿਨशाह ਸੁਣ ਲੈਣ ਸਾਡੇ ਦੁਖੀ ਦਿਲਾਂ ਨੇ ਪਾਸ ਤੋਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਸ਼ਹਿਨशाह ਸੁਣ ਲੈਣ ਸਾਡੇ ਦੁਖੀ ਦਿਲਾਂ ਨੇ ਪਾਸ ਤੋਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਅਰਜ਼ਾਨ ਸੁਣਾਈਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਲਿਖ ਸਰਕਾਰੇ ਪਾਈਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਲਿਖ ਸਰਕਾਰੇ ਪਾਈਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ Thank you. I stopped pretty much in the middle, and I would urge you all to go and listen to the recording and the full album on Spotify, YouTube, and all the music stores online. So it's a request. Do add it to your library. Thank you so much. That was it for the evening.
Just to make the text more accessible, what we did was, because even in Punjab and in Delhi and so on, the population that reads Gurmukhi is shrinking. And so we took the easier way out of transliterating Gurmukhi into Devanagari. And so it's the original Punjabi, which a lot of people in Delhi and all can understand. But it's written in Devanagari so that people who want can read the original and the English translation on the side and evaluate it and give critiques.
Thank you. Firstly, a very big hand to both. Absolutely stunning. And we have probably about 10 minutes for question and answers if there is any questions from the floor.
Was the gathering at the Bagh for the protest or for Vaisakhi celebrations?
So, in a normal year on the 13th of April, a lot of people would come from the villages and from the city itself to the Golden Temple, because Vaisakhi is not just the harvest festival, but it's also the birth of the Khalsa. But on that particular year, there was a curfew in the city. And as I said, General Dyer had gone with his troops throughout the city on the 12th, announcing that from that evening there will be a curfew and a shoot at sight. And so the notion that people were mostly there to celebrate Vaisakhi is historically not accurate. Some would have been there from the inner city who would normally have gone, but a lot of the people were there for protest, and there was a stage and there were speeches delivered from the stage to the protesters. And in fact, one of the interesting things at that time is that there was a whole new genre of protest poetry, which was seen as one way to protest against the British rule. So there was another poet who was reading poems also at that time against the British rule. So it was very much a place for protest. And the reason your question is relevant is, and I'll stick my neck out on this, is that about 2.5 years back, the government, as part of the centenary commemorations, modernized the Jallianwala Bagh. And I really thought that it was a desecration of a sacred site, because yes, you needed better toilet facilities and you needed maybe a better interpretation center, but you don't mess with your own history. And what I thought, the 2 or 3 things which were utterly unforgivable in terms of tampering with our collective memory of the place. One was, you had this really narrow entrance to the Bagh. Not only has it been widened, but there are murals on both sides, dressed in costumes that are historically inaccurate, showing what you said, happy people going to celebrate Vaisakhi, which is not true. But those are the faces that you see as you go in, and there's patriotic music blaring from the speakers. But to me, the worst insult was Jallianwala Bagh was what the killing field that it was, because there was no exit. And as the poem also says, no exit, no escape. The Bagh was a death trap. But what have they done? In the name of convenience of the visitors, they've created a whole separate exit into a different bazaar. And so the sense of the place has been destroyed. The third element to me, which is particularly, again, bad, was Jallianwala Bagh was like a flat, like almost a bowl. It was a dust ball. It wasn't even a bagh in that sense. And as you entered, you were on high ground from where Daesh troops could really fire at will, because everybody was in this little depression. But now you have beautifully landscaped hillocks, and you have hedges with cutaways with soldiers. I mean, I think there's a point at which Disneyfication should stop. And those of us who visited the Holocaust Memorial or the Commonwealth War Graves, cemeteries and others, there's a sense of respect, a sense of reflection that these places should evoke in you, not more selfie points, for heaven's sake. So.
Absolutely well said, I think.
Your grandfather would have shared his experience with his kith and kin at that time. Your family, do you have any access to that? Because that will be very interesting to hear from you.
That's one of the paradoxes, that my grandfather not only hardly ever spoke or wrote about it, but once Khooni Vaisakhi was banned and confiscated and destroyed, it's almost like he himself forgot about it. He wrote his autobiography in 1949, and you have to read it really carefully to find one solitary reference to Khooni Vaisakhi. The stories that we have are really from my grandmother, who outlived my grandfather by a good 20 odd years. And so she was sort of the local family's repository of all that happened. And she used to say that, your grandfather, because he was such a sensitive soul, whatever he saw, he was so traumatized that he just refused to discuss it with anyone. So all we have is some accounts from my grandmother and sort of family folklore. Sorry.
Before I give you the thing, I just wanted to ask Harpreet. So how did you feel when you started composing music, putting it to music?
For me, can you hear me? So when I started putting poetry into music, I started it, because I thought it would be nice to, do something about Jallianwala Bagh, and I've been getting to hear a lot of stories from the family and, relatives from Punjab. But the first time after I had even composed it, while I was recording, I felt something different, that it is something different that is happening in my musical journey. But when I performed it on the 13th April 2019, which was the centenary. And that experience for me was really, it was the first time I had felt that kind of an energy. I almost felt that it was not me who is singing on stage. It was something else. So that was the whole foundation behind putting the whole book into music.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Yes, please.
Thank you so much for this beautiful rendition and taking us back to history. Thank you. You're beautiful. So whatever little we have read, apart from the the crappy history books, that there were a lot of women who were in that Jallianwala Bagh, and they all ran and they all jumped into the wells along with their children, and the wells were full of women and howling and all that. So is there a mention of that in your book, and would you want to share something about that?
Yeah, it's one of the hardest questions, and this is what makes it difficult to separate legend from history. And as I said, when I was doing this book, I read almost everything that I could find about that period, those who had written about it. And I'll give you my best estimate on this and take it for what it is. One is, there actually weren't many women, because in those days it was not common for women to address, to participate in protest rallies and so on. You may have had a sprinkling from the Vaisakhi crowd, but not amongst the large body of protesters. And estimates vary that there were somewhere between 10,000 to 20,000 persons in the Bagh on that afternoon. But nothing more than a handful of women, and even very few kids, because women and kids were usually at home in those times. It just wasn't the done thing in Amritsar in 1919 for women and children to be out. So the majority overwhelmingly were men, and mostly young men at that. The well is the other conundrum, because I also grew up, and I've written in this, that I grew up with the legend of the people being shot, dying, falling, jumping to save themselves. And I have to say, there isn't that much historical evidence. There is some people who were taking shelter near the well were shot and probably fell over into the well, and some who were probably trying to, because the well had a little ledge kind of thing, and so they were trying to hide behind it and so on. But again, my sense is that, and I've discussed it with some other historians and so on who know a lot more about the subject, that again has become partly the stuff of legend. Yes, it is undeniable that some wounded people fell into the well, and yes, there was blood in the well and bodies in the well. But how many? I think there's a fair bit of exaggeration in that. Actually, the majority of people were killed. So the far end of the Bagh is a wall which is about 5 feet high. And so many of them ran towards that wall. There's a narrow section just to try and scale that and go across. And so they were picked off as they were trying to climb. And so you had bodies 3 deep, 4 deep almost next to the wall. And that's where, a lot of people died as they were trying to find a way out. Sorry, maybe I busted a couple of
No, but that's how I think your grandfather survived, because his friends actually fell on top of him.
And there was a stampede. Basically, everybody was rushing towards the wall or helter-skelter, and he got knocked unconscious and literally left amongst the bodies from where he got away. So Jallianwala Bagh is a strange entity. The Prime Minister is the chairman of the Jallianwala Bagh Trust. And so a lot of the stuff got politicized, even the celebrations, who's invited, who's not invited, and all of that got fairly politicized. And I deliberately took a step away from it because I didn't want to there was maybe an emotional reason not to get involved in the in the politics. I think to me the disservice. I mean, we discussed this with a bunch of friends in the Guru Nanak University, others. What would have been a more appropriate gesture to commemorate the centenary? And one of the most interesting ideas came from a professor in the university was these were people protesting against the Rowlatt Act, which was one of the most aggressive legislations against freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. They used to say against the about the Rowlatt Act, no dalil, no vakil, no appeal. You had no recourse. And so one of my friends said, why couldn't it have been created into something like the Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park, where people who have a grievance can come and vent themselves, but maybe that is a step too far.
I think, sorry, one last question.
Well, I am Ramesh. I have on hindsight, I am asking you, sir. We know that the Punjabis are known for their valor and bravery, courage, boldness, or whatever it is. And as part of their own being, they have their swords and kirpan and all that stuff with them. And also with the curfew being imposed, as you had said during the course of your submission, they would have perhaps come prepared for meeting any eventuality that may happen, kind of a thing. And so when that be the case, if they did not show some kind of a resistance or to take on the so-called army, which incidentally was having only one Englishman, and Baki sab shooters were all from the regiments. I don't want to mention those regiments. There are about 4 regiments who participated in that kind of a thing. Bits and pieces of people taken from all these regiments, and they were shooting. So they could have hailed at them and then asked them to stop, or at least made some counter-attack kind of a thing, by which something could have happened, by which this sorry incident could not have happened to this level.
So, firstly, my understanding is that most of the people, the overwhelming majority, were unarmed. They were a fair distance away from the entrance. The stage was set up near a tree that used to be a good 50-60 yards away. Dair's troops came, and it wasn't 4, it was the Gurkha and the Baloch regiments. The troops were drawn from the two. And this was again part of the British method to have outsiders, technically, like who don't have empathy with the local. It's the way the Sikh regiments were used all over the country in 1857 onwards, right? So you had the one group was the Gurkhas and the other was the Baloch, and they were ordered to fire, and they were trained to follow the orders. The moment the firing, there was no warning given for the firing, so the troops came, took positions, the orders given, fire, and they start firing straight into the crowd. I don't think that there was much of a possibility to react. I think the revenge, if you want to look at it, came later in the form of Shaheed Udham Singh waiting 21 years before he could assassinate Michael O'Dwyer in London. But at that point of time, there was certainly no resistance.
There were brave people enough to make a counter. They failed them.
Hypothetically perhaps, but it didn't happen. No.
Anyway, I think we have come to the end of.
Any link to this program, this beautiful program we saw today? Because I know I have so many friends dotted across the world who'd love to see this. So is there any place they could access, you as
Not just the book. What she means is not just the book.
The entire program that we saw today and we witnessed.
Well, the number of songs that he's played is the first time. Today is the first time that he's sung five songs from the album. So you could kind of say that you're witnessing You're witnessing a premiere. If you have friends in Bangalore, please tell them that we're going to be there on the 27th. And then of course in September we are doing Houston, New York, Boston, Seattle, Vancouver, and Toronto. But I think they are going to be. They would have recorded it and it'll go on YouTube. So it should go on YouTube soon.
No, this will definitely come on the CIC website. It will go on the YouTube. Yeah, once again, thank you both. It was an absolutely wonderful evening, a very moving experience for all of us. And I just wanted to thank you on behalf of all of us. And once again, thank you all for coming on a weekday. And we'll have many more events in CIC. As I told you at the beginning, I'm just standing in for Mr. Chandramouli. So I'm sure that the CIC and Mr. Chandramouli will keep you informed. Thank you once
Big
again.
hand to Harpreet.